Understanding the individuals is one piece of this puzzle of steering your organization through change. And today's speaker is going to share thoughts around other pieces of this puzzle to help you make it easier. So I'm really excited to introduce you all to Paulina and for her to share her wisdom with you. She's the founder of Chrysalis, a consulting firm helping companies achieve and sustain their desired culture. She works with companies to go through large-scale change in their businesses, quick growth, M&As, or dealing with trouble and toxicity in their cultures. She created Chrysalis to focus on culture after working on change initiatives and mergers, which experienced roadblocks because companies were constrained by an outdated culture that held them back. Before forming Chrysalis, she was a business transformation and change advisor and has worked a lot using design thinking and agile methodologies. She sought out for her passion for improving the change experience and for building long-term culture change. She's an advocate for the underrepresented in business and works hard to make the world better for her clients. She's also no stranger to change in her life, as she came to Canada from Russia as a political refugee with her family and eventually settled in Chicago. She's worked in M&A, finance, investment banking, and consulting, and I'm really excited to welcome her here today and to learn with her. So welcome.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that wonderful introduction. Okay, can everybody see my screen? Okay, wonderful. And so I'd like to actually start with the perfect segue from Claudia, because as I think you all appreciate because you are here today, is that change is all about people. It is not about a technology or a process or a new framework, or it boils down to people. And when you take care of the people, you take care of their change experience, you're going to get a much better outcome. But that is a lot easier said than done, right? So today we're going to focus on just a couple of pieces. There are more pieces to this, but I don't want to overwhelm you, because if you have too much, then it's hard to do anything. So I'd rather have you look at a couple of things and pick one or two things that you can do consistently, because that will move things forward a lot more and will give you perspective rather than just loading you up with a ton of frameworks. All right, so here we go. Well, the reality is that there is a lot of change. It's happening in every industry. In just about every industry, the trends that we thought were coming over a medium to longer term have been accelerated by COVID. And we all had to react in ways that we weren't expecting to at the same time when we were dealing with our own personal and family situations and COVID. And so now we have to work differently. We have to collaborate differently. We're even making decisions in a completely different way. And that's not going to change because COVID isn't going away. And the normal has shifted, and it is continuing to shift, especially as we're seeing the leverage or the power between employees and employers change in ways that really was accelerated here, hopefully for the better. I'm certainly feeling for the better. And so because change is here to stay, we really need to equip ourselves as an organization, as teams, and as individuals. We just can't leave things as they are and hope our people will just get through it and be able to ride it out, right? We can't do that to our people. And so change is here. And the reality is that being change agile, or just not letting continuous change exhaust your people, that's another way of thinking it. It's a core competency. Okay, so what does that mean when I say core competency? It means that good organizations that are good at change, they've got to be good at change. Good organizations can learn and grow and adapt and evolve, right? So that means all of us have got to get really, really comfy with change, right? No, change is hard. Change is uncomfortable, right? Change is the opposite of what we like. We like stability, we like transparency, we like predictability, and a whole bunch of other illities that I could talk about that basically mean that things stay the same. Since we were doing book recommendations, I'm going to throw in a book recommendation that it comes at it at a completely different point. Living Beautifully with Uncertainty and Change. This is written by a Buddhist nun who brings some really interesting concepts around change. Again, this is a different viewpoint, but we all need to bring different viewpoints into our conversations. So I'm going to set this down because I help companies work with a lot of uncertainty. Okay, so the first thing I just wanted to talk about is having an intentional mindset around change, choosing to be intentional about how you think about change. So that's the first piece. We keep it simple, right? You don't have to have a big framework. We're just going to say, hey, we're going to approach change in an intentional way. And growth mindset is a great place to start. And that's going to help you think about, so how are you going to treat the concept of failure? Because when you are dealing with change, you are looking at failure right in the face because you're coming across situations you haven't been in before. So they might not work out the way you want them to work out. So you have a choice. Do you approach those situations as not being good enough, or do you bring compassion? Bottom line is, we want to be focused and intentional. And if you just pick one thing, that's okay. And that's not just for yourself. That's how are we going to do this as a company, as a team? Okay. So just give me 1 second here. I'm going to move you guys down a little bit. Okay. So I mentioned growth mindset, and I'm sure you've talked about growth mindset and you've heard about it, but I'm going to do a baby refresher for all you folks on growth mindset, because this is an important one. I'm asking you to consider how having a growth mindset could help you get better at change. And it is a really important distinction in how we see ourselves. So fixed mindset. People with a fixed mindset believe that the qualities are set in stone. You were born with it. You can't get better. I'm not a math person. I'm not a writer. I'm not creative. I'm not innovative. How many times have we heard that? And they believe that success is really dependent on the level of your innate ability that you are born with. You can't get any better. So what ends up happening is people with a fixed mindset dread any interaction with failure and avoid those situations. And they also have an urgency to prove themselves over and over again and get constant validation. And when you fail, you're not good enough. And that is a sentence. On the other hand, with growth mindset, people with this mindset believe that effort and training can change your qualities and your abilities, and they attribute their success to learning. And once they are confident that they've done the effort and learn a skill and improve performance, that carries to other things. And they have the belief that everyone can learn and grow and develop. And with this, they bring a passion for learning. And so when they look at failure, it is a part of failure is learning, because the big piece, the big benefit of failure is the learning. So what I do want to say is, you're not one or the other. In certain cases, you may have a fixed mindset. In other cases, you have a growth mindset. But the point is to just bring your attention to thinking about, hey, we're going through change. How is it going to serve us if we come at it with a fixed mindset, right? Would it not help us to come at change with a growth mindset, with a thought that we can learn, that we can get better, that we don't have to accept our lot as being really bad at X, Y, or Z? And then that also impacts how we think about failure. If we're constantly worried about our performance, how likely are we going to take new steps, take action, or move forward, not knowing how things are going to work out? Probably a lot less likely. You're going to want to check everything, double, triple check, analyze everything to see if it works. And that's going to really slow you down. And in change, oftentimes, actually, I'm going to say pretty much all the time, you don't set the pace of change, right? You don't go like, hey, I'm just going to wait for this. No, you got to be there, right? So how would things be different if you had a growth mindset when it comes to change? And perhaps saying, why don't I take one thing to look at and one thing to get better at? So how could we consider failure as not a bad word, but actually the first attempt in learning? right? To think about, hey, going into something new is a new chance to get or fail, to get that first attempt, and then come back to that in a better place, in a new place, and setting ourselves up for success. And so I'm not here to get all Tony Robbins on you, right? But I just want to take these couple of minutes that I spent on this is to say that the mindset is really important and it will serve you well. Okay, so I want to also highlight this piece of change. When you are thinking about and going through change or changes that you're going to have your company deal with, or reorgs, or going into a new business, or whatever that is, these are the key areas that people are going to worry about first. And it all boils down to their sense of security. It's your job. Are you going to have it? Is your career trajectory in place? Your identity, it's who you are. Hey, I used to be the guy who had all the answers, or I was the marketing person. With change, that is at risk. Your compensation, is that going to change? Will you still have the livelihood you thought you had? Managers, so who are you working with? Who are your champions? If that's at risk, you might feel like you're under shaky ground. And also, really importantly, is who you work with, right? It's not just the money piece, as we know, and because we care about people, we care about who we work with, whether that's our colleagues, our clients, and how that happens. Some of us have had a really hard time with the pandemic because who we work with physically now is no one. And there's loneliness and there's difficulty in doing your work by yourself and not doing things the way you used to. So the point here is, as you think about change, this is almost a checklist to say, okay, is this going to hit on these points? And if so, what am I going to tell people? How am I going to make them feel more comfortable? And I understand you might not be able to do that, but when you have this in the back of your head, you're already starting to form empathy with people and thinking about what they're going to be thinking as they're going through this, and you can meet them where they are. Because again, being good at change means meeting people where they are and working with them and being with them at that place rather than the place you need them to be. So before we talk about how to get better at change, let's acknowledge a couple of things about why is it hard, right? Back to my book. It's uncertainty, ambiguity, having to take action, oftentimes without previous experience or knowing how things will turn out because it hasn't happened before, because you haven't done it before. And now you have to make decisions that could be pretty significant without complete information or precedent. That's hard. However, I also want to say that I believe in all of you, and I know you believe in your teams. So, number one, just because you haven't done it before doesn't mean you can't, right? And that's a really important thing to convey to your people. And oftentimes you're in it together. You haven't done it either, and you got to lead the troops. And number two, there is nothing wrong with you because you haven't done it. You're not good enough. You're not like, I didn't go to the right school, or the this or the that, or I didn't do this particular secondment, or I don't have experience in it. You can't be everything. And even if you've done it before, it might look different this time. So don't beat yourself up. And I can tell you, your people are thinking this too. I haven't done it before. Will I be okay? It's all right. You will be okay. I believe in you. All right. So now let's get to the important part of things. So we're going to talk about key components here, getting better at change. And this is one that I think is often overlooked because people think about, I got to learn new skills. I've got to learn something new. I've got to add, I've got to enhance, I've got to redo. But before we add, we actually want to subtract, because some of the things that hold you back from being good at change are these impediments, right? That are in your organization with your people. So we look at that first. What's holding you back? What is lowering the bar for you to be able to be good at change? What can we do to get you up to a better place to start from? Okay, then, of course, we got to build the change skills. We're layering that on top. And then finally, not exclusively, but finally for today, it's about committing to action. So what are you actually going to do? What are you going to do consistently? And what habits can you create? And if you only create one habit, that's okay, because if you're doing it consistently, you are getting better at change. So I'll give you a second to read through some of these. Let me know if any of these do not sound familiar. Right? Have we dealt with some of these things that are holding us back? Have you seen some of these things before? Right? And this is not a comprehensive list. This list can be pretty substantive, right? How about flipping it to the key change skills? Again, this is not exhaustive, but these are some of the things that will help us. Navigating uncertainty, ambiguity, walking with fear. Fear is huge. Fear is what makes change so difficult. And you will never eliminate it. But how do you keep taking steps forward and help your people take steps forward? Making decisions during change, very difficult. It's going to be more complex. When you're making decisions in a complex world with that uncertainty, you got to empower folks. That may be very hard for folks, for certain organizations and certain leaders. Well, flip side of empowerment, you got to have accountability. Can't give the power away without having accountability. You're naturally going to have conflict and tension as things are in flux. And so can your organization be flexible? Of course, growth mindset, fail fast, and then taking risk. Because moving forward and change involves some level of risk. Otherwise, you end up just sitting there. Okay, so what I'm going to do is we're going to run through a couple of examples, and then you're going to take this away to your breakout session and actually work through one together with your teams. So here is the first example. So as things are changing and a lot is coming at you, it becomes very hard to prioritize, or it can, right? This is one of the big ones that I see a lot. And so, again, not exhaustive, but how does it show up? You don't know what to focus on. Everything feels important. You're trying to do all of it and you're exhausted, right? Your ability to be agile, your ability to be nimble, your ability to just take change becomes really hard because you're exhausted. And then at the same time, folks don't actually know what's expected of them. Because right now, you're expected to just do it all. And you can't. So what are some of the change skills that you can apply here? And again, these are not one-to-one relationships. Prioritization requires this level for this change skills. But what I'm trying to get you to think about is, okay, so that's your impediment. What are you going to do? What change skills can you bring up to help make it easier? Okay, so perhaps take a look at your decision-making and being consistent. Learning to say no. Who's faced that one, right? As a business owner, as a team lead, as an individual contributor, we all face this at least on a weekly basis, right? Saying no. And also the way I like to think about it is actually saying no to this so that you can say yes to this, right? And no could be not right now, I'm not the right person, whatever that means. And that's setting boundaries and limits. And the main thing here is getting you to focus on the actions that you're going to take. So what can you consistently do? And this is just an example. Okay, meetings are great places to do things consistently because meetings happen all the time. So can we reinforce priorities? Can we eliminate some of the competing priorities? Where can you practice? That's the thing. It's really hard to set up a habit if you don't have a place to practice. It's basically impossible because you're going to forget. The number one reason people cannot do a habit is because they forget. So you need reminders, but you need practice and you also need a place to practice. So this is a place to think, this is a way to think about it. And then, so how are you going to reinforce it? There are many ways to reinforce it, but you got to close that loop because you're going to forget. You might not have a place to do it. So once you have those pieces, then, for example, it becomes somebody's job, or there's some level of accountability. So this is one that I've gone through. I'm going to take another one where we can walk through this together. So I haven't fully filled it out. So we're going to do this one together. And then the third one, you are going to do by yourself. So do you sometimes have too many people making decisions? Everybody wants, especially as you're growing, right? Everyone is used to being consulted, and not just consulted, but part of the decision. But as you're growing, or as you're splintering off, or you've got to tackle something specific, you can't have everybody in the room, right? You just, first of all, you got to have those meetings. So that's extra meetings. Mm-hmm. Everybody needs to weigh in. Well, when you have extra meetings, you got to talk about it. Everybody has a say. You are losing time. And time, in these cases, could actually be opportunity cost. And after a while, it's just disempowering too, because everybody, you got to wait for that last person to get on the proverbial bus. So I put a couple of change skills, but there may be others. So I'm going to flip it back to you folks and just popcorn it a little bit to say, what change skills can help us deal with this particular impediment?
Interestingly, one of the ones you had on the last one may also be applicable here.
Totally. It's not mutually exclusive. Yeah.
So I feel like getting really crystally clear around accountabilities and say, like, whose call is this, I think can help. So you had, I think, in the previous slide talking about building out a RACI and trying to make that more understood. So I think that can be particularly useful when trying to be more efficient in decision making. The other one, actually, I was thinking is a skill I learned from Claudia, is the distinction between consent and consensus. A lot of organizations that have this are consensus building. They want everyone to weigh in. They want everyone to have a say, and then you can only move forward when you've got consensus from everyone, which is different from, we're doing this thing. Speak now if you are really, really opposed. Otherwise, we're moving forward. And so you consent to, maybe it's not how I would have done it, but it's fine. It's enough to go forward. Waiting for a full consensus is exhausting. It takes forever.
Give me the look, right?
Yeah. I think that is a different way to sometimes move in a difficult decision. It's like, is this the hill that you're gonna die on? Is this one you have to say no to? So I think that's been the distinction between those things, I think, has been helpful. I think particularly for new managers who are unsure of their own authority, and they want to make sure everyone's on board first, and teaching that difference has been helpful.
Anything else?
I would just say, Paulina, one thing I've seen is that in the change process, there's a lot of confusion about roles. And I think role confusion can breed a lot of conflict. So just to try and clarify, even if it's a transition state, where some of the delineations or the boundaries are, I think can be really helpful in keeping some of that clarity, even while other things are changing, and ensuring that people don't end up in direct conflict situations.
I 100% agree with you. Expectations and clarity is a very big part of how I do change management work, because it's not just what your role is, but what is expected of you, right? How do I expect you? And this is a good time to say, this is what I don't expect you. So I don't expect you to learn the system in 1 week. I don't expect you to have figured out this new thing right away. This is a time to actually be able to give your people support. But I do expect you to speak up. I do expect you to flag things because we may not have worked out this particular process yet. I do expect you to ask for customers' feedback, or talk to your manager about your new role, right? Those are really big ones. And expectations and clarity, that's especially from your manager. Those are things that are often missed when it comes to change, because people get the big picture. It's like, oh, what's in it for me? This is what's happening with the business. Okay, I may get a new job description or new responsibilities, but so then what, right? So that's a big one. What else?
But I've seen that before. If people don't know exactly where you're trying to drive the bus, then everyone has an opinion. Where if it's much clearer on this is what we're trying to do as a business, then it's a little bit easier to know who needs to make what calls or what calls need to be made. Lack of overall strategy can lead to everyone having an opinion on things.
Yeah. And does that include a definition of your desired future state? Because I think people need to know where you're trying to get to, what that destination is.
Yep.
The vision for the future. I know that that can really help lift people out of the depths of depression around the fact that they're having to give up a lot in terms of what they're losing with the old way no longer being the new way.
Yeah. And I think this is a good call out here, because the assumption is that when you say this is what we're doing, it's very clear. One thing I've learned in life is the person who has the idea, it's very clear in their head. And one thing to really keep in mind is when you've been going through either a new strategy or a reorg or trying something new, you've been thinking about it for a lot longer, AKA like the entire time you've been thinking about it is way longer than the person who's just hearing the message. So it is absolutely crystal clear in your mind. You've gone through all the iterations, you totally get it. And then you expect the person to be with you in that mind meld. Absolutely not going to happen, right?
Yeah.
So you need to honor where they're coming from it when they're hearing for the first time, and do not assume, especially so much of the language that we use is very corporate. It's not specific. It uses corporate jargon, which leads to a lot of assumptions. And you may have 5 leaders that think they know exactly what the strategy is and have 5 different interpretations and opinions. So really great call out, Kathy, on that one. Let's go to the next piece. Okay, so this is all great. Like, I like these discussions, but I'm a doer. I'm a commitment to action person. So what are you going to do about it, right? With all of this in mind, in this hypothetical situation, what would you do?
I think it's having a clear decision-making framework. So having a guidelines on we're seeking consensus, or Russ has ultimate decision, or it's majority rules. Just what's your governance and how are you making these, and use that in, say, we're going to use this in our leadership meeting for the next quarter, and give yourself a pilot situation to try it out.
So what would be a good pilot situation, right? Situations, right? You don't get one chance to practice. You need multiple times.
Yeah. Yeah.
Practice. Yeah. Where would be a good place to practice?
One thing that I've done frequently is just also understanding in this case, too many people are making decisions or trying to have a voice in the decision. May speak to all sorts of things, why people feel the need to be heard. And so one can't ignore that. That's an intrinsic driver that's going to still keep me raising my hand or wanting to get my point out. So I would often say to a leader, let's go into the conversation at the outset and say, we know that there are lots of different opinions, and we know that you all have a perspective on this. We need to make a decision. We need to land the ship today, or land the plane, whatever your metaphor is. But acknowledging it up front is really, really important, because it does some preemptive acknowledgement of even kind of people wanting to be heard. Some companies just have a great tendency of piling on. I agree. No, I agree that I agree, and you agree too. And they say that not because they're just piling on; they want to be heard. So I would encourage anyone who's running a meeting, back to the governance a little bit, just to be very clear, to acknowledge that. And also make it equally clear that we are going to land a decision today, and we might not hear every opinion.
Yeah. Sue, you raised your hand. I'm going to give it to you here.
Thanks. So I thought, you can certainly implement for a project like that accountability, the idea of having an accountability matrix and deciding ahead of time where people are looking, where the leader or the team leader is looking for recommendations, where they're going to make a group decision, where he or she's going to make their own decision. So I think to answer your question, that would be good. The other thought I had, and I've used this in the past, is to use what I call Verb spurred agendas. Often in agendas, we just list the topics. But if you actually say, you know, we're going to decide on this. We're going to entertain recommendations for this. We're going to brainstorm on this. If you use a verb associated with the agenda topic, then you can begin to get some more clarity about where people are going to have a voice and where they're not.
I like it. Let's go to the also ever important topic of how are you going to reinforce this? Because we got a plan. We know we're going to veer off. We know we're going to forget. We know other things will become important. So what are you going to do to reinforce, to make sure that this happens? Or what are some things that you can do?
So I was actually thinking about that. In our meetings recently, we've made this change where when in the management meetings, when you introduce a topic, you have to do like a meta introduction first. And so to say, today, I'm introducing this just to inform you, or I'm introducing this because I'm looking to make a decision and I want your input. Or so you have to decide like why you're bringing it up. I think this goes to Claudia's point. What's the framework we're using? And so before anyone's allowed to like actually start talking, they got to say, what's the purpose of the topic? And then who do they need to make a decision? And then they can introduce what they're going to say. So like there's a bit of like a preamble. It just helps us to make that RACI like charter, to make that decision-making framework more ever present in meetings. It's a new muscle we're trying to get into, rather than just going off on a tangent and explaining your thing for like 5 minutes. We're trying to make that like meta point first and then get to the topic.
Yeah, make it clear. I like that a lot. What do you want? You set it up. Set it up. It's like a little primer, right?
Mm-hmm.
What else? Before I set you off on your own.
We don't have this above. I wonder if this would be in the what can you do? And I don't know if this is right, so tell me what you think. But just delegation generally, right? We all want to be included, but trying to figure out, are we needed? Are we needed? Can we trust these other people to do it? Like opting out of things that we can and enabling those people to make those decisions. Taking ourselves out of the equation is we're making less people, even if it's in that form.
Yeah. Upwards, I'm going to say upwards and downwards, right? Because you can delegate, you as a leader may have to empower others to let go, but you, if you're on the lower, you know, if you're giving power to your leader. Yes, I trust that the leader, or I trust that the leadership team, it's going to be 3 people as opposed to the extended leadership team where all 12 of us get on the phone. Yeah, it goes both ways. And I'm going to say it was Haley, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, your first comment around, I'm going to totally catch you on this. If it's right or not, doesn't matter, because the fact that you said it is right, because it gave us, all of us, something that we can learn from. And you taking that chance to not necessarily be right benefited all of us. So thank you. Okay, so now that we are experts at this, we've done it twice. What we're going to do is you're going to do this together.
I just want to say thank you to everyone, especially Paulina, for taking us through this wonderful change exercise. And I personally have a lot to think about because I need to get better at it, as we all do. So thank you for that great session. Secondly, I want to say that we have our next session coming up in October, and it's called It's Scary Out There. So would love for you all to attend that session, because it's all about recruiting and hiring, and it's really, really hard right now. So we're going to have some great people on to talk about that and maybe help us get some solutions so we can continue to grow our organizations that will eventually go through change. So I'm looking forward to that. And thank you all for just spending some time with us. This was incredible. And as normal, there's new people on. I see some faces from before. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And we look forward to seeing you in the future.